recording is on.
All right, so the recording is on. We're good to go. And this is my guest, Troutface, who has appeared before more than once on this delightful little podcast. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Troutface. I've appeared more than once on this delightful podcast.
You sure have. And you still are very trout-like. And
Yeah, in more ways than one.
yeah, do you prefer books or streams, I mean?
I guess with the way media content is on the internet, I've really acclimated to streaming services, but I'd be okay if book services became more prominent.
Yeah. So, today we're going to be discussing Ash vs. Evil Dead, and also an episode of Tales from the Crypt that is very heavy in Humphrey Bogart. So I've actually taken some notes here, and so here's an overview of Ash vs. Evil Dead. You know, it's a horror comedy TV series that premiered on Starz in 2015 and concluded in 2018 after 3 seasons. It serves as a continuation of the Evil Dead film series, which began with the 1981 film The Evil Dead, directed by Sam Raimi. So, what are your thoughts on, the original Evil Dead first?
I really like the Evil Dead movies. I think Evil Dead 2 is a little bit better. It takes itself less seriously, and I think it finds its voice a lot more quickly. And then the Army of Darkness, I thought was well done. I think there's an already really well established voice, and they were very creative with it.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true for the show Ash vs. Evil Dead.
Well, I think that. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, there's an established voice that, but there's also a lot of room for creativity, and I think they do some innovative things with camera work. And then they also do some callback things with camera work, but it still seems innovative because of how creative and well integrated it is.
Yeah. Well, but one thing I have to brag about is that I actually did an interview piece with Joseph Loduca, the composer of the Evil Dead series, so that's pretty cool. You can find that article or that interview article over at 1428elm.com. And really, the interview pieces don't get that many. They really don't get that many clicks or views as somebody might think. So go ahead and check that out. It's interesting. I'm not just talking to you, Troutface. I mean anybody out there who might be listening to this little episode. I had to do a little bit of a plug.
Yeah, it's good though, because you've got this Troutface hooked.
Yeah. So, of course, the series stars Bruce Campbell as Ash Williams, reprising his role from the original films. Ash is now working as a stock boy at a value stop where he accidentally reads from the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, unleashing evil spirits known as Deadites upon the world once again. So, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what are your thoughts on Deadites and, the fact that he was working at this sort of Walmart-like place?
So I worked at a Walmart-like place for a long time, and I understand the profound boredom that comes with that.
Yeah.
Like, I could see working there and wanting to read from the Necronomicon.
Yeah.
So I can identify with that. One thing that I think of with the Deadites is their powers or their abilities aren't really well defined, which makes them scary, but it also kind of makes the world a little harder to understand.
That's true, yeah.
So it's...
for me, there's a little bit of a Nightmare on Elm Street effect with that, because Freddy's powers are never 100% defined either, but it's also implied that, a lot of it has to do with the power of imagination and will, and it seems like if you have courage, you're more likely to be able to defeat a demon or something like that. And that's similar to what happens, with Freddy Krueger, of course. It's a mind over matter kind of thing.
Yeah. I do always have questions though. So they possessed Ash's right hand in the
Yeah.
original movies. Um, and then I was wondering, like, after they did that, did something happen with Ash where he can't be possessed anymore? Because it seems like there's a limit to the number of attempts they have with possession.
Yeah, I don't well, I mean the whole thing about there's like a preordained aspect to the storyline because there's a lot of I don't know, sort of mysticism somehow tied into Ash's story, which is almost contradictory because he's kind of an everyman sort of thing, but at the same time he's like more than that. So it's a little bit confusing, but somehow Sam Raimi has this power to still make it work. I think that's really one of his gifts as a filmmaker is that he can sort of make you not care about plot holes or things that are indefinite or
Yeah,
undefined. I mean, not indefinite. Jesus Christ, I can't even talk.
I think there's a. I've noticed, and I think the one reason why this goes well with that Tales from the Crypt episode is the shots are a bit comic book like.
Yeah.
And I think that stylized sense does carry some of the storytelling in a very good way. I think it does help move things along so Ash can simultaneously appear heroic, but also kind of daft.
Oh yeah. He's definitely got a lot of. I can't remember any of his lines offhand, but some of them are pretty funny. Like,
Yeah, like when that state trooper tries to arrest him and he's hitting on her the whole time, and he thinks they're going to like meet in the bathroom and have sex.
oh yeah, yeah, that's true. And there's also a line about him where he recommends going to take Ray Santiago's character and Kelly, played by Dana DiLorenzo. What was that?
Oh, that was my alarm
Jesus.
for 6:30.
Okay.
I don't think it was Jesus, but we'll see.
Well, anyway, he was promising to take them, out for some churros, and he tells Pablo, and that's not because you're Mexican. It's just because churros are a delightful snack or something like that. And then Pablo has to remind him that he's not actually from Mexico or
Yeah,
something like that. That's one of the funnier lines. I think that's in season one. And I
yeah.
do apologize a bit for my voice, but I've got a bit of a cold, so I might sound even more Kermit the Frog like than normal. You know what I'm saying?
You
Or Rick
could lean into
Moranis.
that. You
Oh,
could
not
lean
Rick
in,
Moranis. Jeez, what's the name of the guy from
like Jim Henson,
Ghostbusters who played Egon?
Sam. I was gonna say Sam Raimi, but it's
I can't think of his name. Oh my god. Hold on, I'm gonna look that up. Egon from Ghostbusters. It says played by Harold Ramis. Ramisy. I couldn't even think of Harold Ramis' name. I think I have early onset Alzheimer's. But anyway, that was one of the funny lines. And of course, we've got Pablo and Kelly, played by Ray Santiago and Dana DiLorenzo. And then you have a new ally slash villain named Ruby, played by Lucy Lawless. And they all kind of set out to stop the Deadites and save the world. So, what are your thoughts on like the? Do you think they should save the world, or would if you were in their place, would you try to save it yourself, or just kind of kick back and see what happens?
I So when I think of the episode where they're in the Michigan, where they're like captured by the Michigan militia, and Ash and the state trooper are locked in the I think it's a bomb shelter underground.
Yeah,
And just the general way they're treated, I think that would make it hard for me to want to save humanity. I think I might kind of give up.
yeah.
Um,
But I
and
guess I guess that's the difference between somebody like Ash and somebody like us.
yeah, yeah,
Of course, one of the reasons Ash might be feeling a sense of obligation is because he actually triggered the problem to begin with by reading from the book.
yeah. I think I would have probably, if I were in that position, if I had such a book, I'd probably lock it in a safe and then
Yeah,
just never open it,
yeah.
and possibly even bury the safe somewhere. But even that seems risky. I'd probably keep it in my residence in like a fire safe locked.
So, as we already established, the series features the signature humor and over the top violence of the original films, with Ash often using his chainsaw hand and boomstick to dispatch the Deadites. And it was well received by both critics and fans of the original films for its faithful continuation of the series and its ability to balance horror and comedy. So, that's one of the things I want to mention here is that it would actually be pretty tricky to do that balance because there's some definite moments in the series and the movies that are just so slapstick goofy, but then there's still some genuine moments that are like creepy and a little bit scary and all that. It's hard to be that zany yet still have it be scary at all.
Yeah, my favorite episode that balances that is the one where they summon that demon in the salt circle.
Yeah,
Um, I think it's pretty early in season one, so maybe like episode 3 or something. But I think that balances so well because Ash has this bravado, and it's pretty obvious that he's making some ridiculous assumptions about the demon, like he thinks it's a nerd demon that he can bully.
that is
And
pretty funny when he's like treating
yeah,
it like it's a nerd, like he's a high school bully and he can just bash the nerd or whatever. It really shows his naivete,
yeah, and his
bravado.
yeah, it's kind of like this enthusiastic, never ceasing confidence.
Yeah. And
Uh,
another scene that really I almost don't want to admit that I like the scene, but it's when he's in the morgue and he basically ends up with his head up the dead body's butt and stuff like that. Because it's such a gross out scene, and it's obvious that they were trying to go for the low bar humor on that. So I almost don't want to even admit that I found it as funny as I did, but it is good.
yeah, yeah, I do like the practical effects they have with the bodies that they're cutting open. Which is something that I think Tales from the Crypt also does really well.
Yeah.
So I think there's some overlap there with, and the sound effects are well done, like the squish sounds and the
Oh
of
yeah.
the
Yeah.
slop and gore.
And I'm going to talk about a few of the other stars too. You had Jill Marie Jones as Amanda Fisher in season one, who played a Michigan State trooper who set out to find Ash following the death of her partner. And I wish that they. I mean, this is a spoiler alert, but I wish they hadn't killed her off. Well, I almost shouldn't bother with spoiler alerts because this shows up. It's been over for a while now. But what are your thoughts on their killing her off?
They make her a very unlikable character pretty early on. The way she betrays in the same episode where they summon that demon in the salt circle.
Yeah,
That state trooper betrays Kelly and really villainizes Ash in a way that seems to get the audience against her. And then in the next episode, there's like this budding romance, and then she
yeah,
dies and becomes a deadite. So there's a lot of fast action going on, so the audience doesn't really settle with an opinion or doesn't really.
See, I kind of disagree. I think I can say that I was expecting her to be, maybe a main character that would go throughout the entire series run or something like that. Maybe she would have been expended further down the line, but I kind of think maybe the show would have even been more successful if they had kept her on. That's how I think
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. She has so many broad identities on the
Yeah,
show in like a short span of episodes. Um,
that's true. I suppose some people were like a little bit confused about where they were going with the character.
yeah, because they also save Kelly, so it's reasonable for the audience to wonder, can they save her, the state trooper?
Yeah.
Um, but it like the in terms of saving people from possession, it seems like that's maybe only the shaman character can do that, or it seems like it's something that's not easily done.
Well, like I said earlier, I think it has to do with a person's strength of will
Yeah,
too, because definitely not everyone, in the film series who was possessed had survived, and I think it's been pretty well established that some people can come back, but definitely not everybody. So, what are your thoughts on Lee Majors as Brock Williams, Ash's father?
that was um that was a fascinating choice,
Yeah,
and not to sound ageist, but I wouldn't have thought Ash's parents would really be on the show,
yeah, yeah,
but I think it's a good addition, and I think it really lets the show explore some of Ash's backstory and
yeah,
kind of get a sense of the and maybe like how the bravado and trauma served him before
yeah.
the 80s.
Well, it's also, of course, the case that Brock is a bit like Ash, in his attitude and all that kind of stuff, and his behavior.
Yeah,
So there's a bit of a father like son sort of dynamic, and then you've got Alan Sandweiss returning as Cheryl Williams, who was, of course, in the original Evil Dead movie. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
uh, I think her performance was pretty good. Like,
Yeah,
um, I think it was a good callback. Um, seemed to fit well. It seemed to integrate well. Um, and I
and
was thinking about also with Ash's father. There's like this opportunity for the Ash to see his behavior, like his idiosyncratic behavior, in someone else. And it
yeah.
seems like there could be a really good self-reflection piece that comes from that. Um,
Oh, speaking of seeing his own behavior,
yeah,
what did you think of the puppet sequence?
I think it works pretty well in the show. Like I could understand why some people might not agree with that, but
Yeah,
um,
I thought it was zany and fun.
yeah, I think it fits the tone really well, and I don't think it disrupts the horror side of it.
No,
I think it embeds itself well.
I think it really fits the overall tone of the show, and it's just zany to see a hand puppet or whatever those sock puppet. I don't know, but it's basically just like a monstrous version of Ash,
Yeah,
and it's kind of a callback to Evil Dead 2, where his hand is demonically possessed.
yeah,
So we also have the return of Henrietta Noby and all that kind of stuff, and the whole ashy slashy thing that was because he killed all of his friends in that cabin. Oops, I said the F word. I
no,
said the F word. I'm sorry. but he killed
That's
all of
right.
his associates in the cabin.
Yeah,
So
his
what do you think
cohort.
about all of his past coming back to haunt him?
I think there's so it's interesting because there's a lot of points in the show where so early on Ash is like clearly in this takes this leadership position or takes this kind of bossy attitude, but
Yeah,
he gradually integrates Pablo and Kelly more and more, where he's conferring with them or collaborating with them, and he gets kind of a phobic response when like random hikers come by or people like he just views everyone as a liability, and it seems like there's a profound loneliness that comes with that
yeah,
that he's kind of confronting and kind of not. Um, and a lot of that comes out sexually, which works well for the show's humor. Um, but I think it's an interesting psychological dynamic to view yourself as a liability and the savior.
yeah, and it's also interesting. I think that he was somehow able to like avoid getting in trouble for being in that cabin where all of his buddies died or were killed or whatever, and they apparently never pinned it on him. That's a little bit strange to me.
Yeah,
So that's like that could be considered a massive plot hole or something like that.
yeah, it kind of gets addressed with like the state troopers following him, but like that is a big thing to all those people die
Yeah,
and one survives, and nothing really gets happened, nothing gets questioned.
and he was even working at the Walmart Lake place. Of course. Well, anyway, I think we've talked about that show pretty thoroughly. Do you have any more thoughts on it?
No, I would recommend it to anyone that like the original. It's a pretty good continuation if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, I would even say there are some moments that definitely rival the original trilogy. It's that good that it doesn't really. I think very few people would say, "Oh, I prefer the original movies like vastly more than Ash versus Evil Dead." So, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay. So, we're gonna start talking about the Tales from the Crypt episode "You Murderer" now. So that's actually the one that you originally wanted to talk about. So
Yeah.
I'll let you lead with that one.
Um. So I think what stands out from the episode is the special effects kind of come out, and I think they'd come out to current audiences differently than how they would back in the day when that episode first aired.
Yeah,
Um, Back in the day, people were kind of impressed by it. Like they used CG to have a passable Humphrey Bogart in the show.
yeah,
And then and I think nowadays people might focus on how fake it is, but I think the style around it, there's almost like a comic book style and mirror shots and a lot of first person perspective that I think makes the episode very interesting.
yeah,
Um, the way Isabella Rossellini and John Lithgow interact with the camera is really cool. Like I think it draws the audience in. It makes it more palpable.
yeah.
Um,
It's
and John
definitely
Lithgow has
oh
John Lithgow and Isabella Rossellini have amazing performances.
yeah. I think it's a unique episode of Tales from the Crypt, which if you don't know, that show lasted from 1989 to 1996. So a lot of us, growing up in the 80s and 90s would have seen it probably. And this episode is indeed unique because they used advanced visual effects for the time anyway to incorporate footage of Humphrey Bogart, who died in 1957, into a new story. So what do you think of that story anyway?
Um, so it's the plot. isn't like super interesting.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that the plot's bad, but it's not like overly unique. It's kind of like a murder mystery or like a murder. Um, how can you like kind of the Columbo theme? I
yeah,
think that genre is called How Catch 'em. Like you know who the killers are right away. How do they get their punishment? And Tales from the Crypt episodes typically end in punishment, so the audience knows what's coming. They just don't necessarily know how.
yeah,
And I think it's so well done because the main character is dead, and you see things through his perspective, and it seems like they're just going to get away with it, even though stuff goes poorly for them at first. With that secretary arriving and
yeah,
um, kind of forcing their hand a little bit. But the end of the episode, I think, is simple and elegant, and kind of fits how this show works.
yeah.
Um,
Well, it's sort of an interesting interpretation of death
yeah,
because when you think of somebody being dead, you think of, if you're into the belief of an afterlife, you normally think they're going to be up in heaven or down in hell or maybe reincarnated or something like that. But he just stays within his body, really, as sort of a perpetual limbo,
yeah,
which is definitely, you don't really see that very often in any stories.
yeah.
So
And
there's
some,
even that aspect of it that really kind of stands out a little bit. And the episode was directed by Robert Zemeckis, who's known for directing Back to the Future and Forrest Gump, and is written by Gilbert Adler and A.L. Katz, and as you mentioned, it stars John Lithgow. What do you think of his? You said his performance was good. What stands out about John Lithgow to you in this
um,
episode?
I think there's something about seeing someone on two angles, because you see like kind of his kindness and affection,
Yeah,
and how he seems to care for Humphrey Bogart, and then you see how he
or
like
whatever the
his
guy's
rage.
name is.
Yeah, yeah, you see like his rage and his backstabbing and his panic and his kind of like condescending attitude. And it seems like I see that a lot in authority figures,
Yeah,
like that back and forth, like they're more fake public side than their real side, or maybe they're more angry side. So it makes him seem very real as a villain.
yeah, that happens all the time too. I
Yeah,
think when people get positions of power or authority, they they kind of naturally assume that they need to put up a false front, even if their job is relatively modest. They kind of
mhm.
have to assume a different personality at times, and it's kind of an interesting thing to watch because there's like a chameleon nature to it.
Yeah, and I actually think that people tend to view things as sometimes in terms of it is or it isn't. And I think John Lithgow really shows a lot of the gray. Like, I think he does have real affection for Humphrey Bogart's character. And I think he has real animosity and disgust. Like, I think they both exist.
Yeah,
And I think that's how people are in real life. Like, they can feel genuine affection and genuine like rage, and they'll have those conflicting motivations of wanting to see someone succeed and die.
yeah.
And
So
they
I,
want both to be true.
I have kind of an interesting angle. It's not really a critique of the episode necessarily, but I, it's basically an examination of sort of what if the story had been written in a different way, based on the appearance of the Humphrey Bogart character. I'm a bit surprised the story didn't involve a main character who's, a 1950s era private investigator investigating a murder or something. And, I could imagine the detective discovers someone has the ability to transfer people's souls into other bodies or something like that. and maybe that's why the character looks and sounds like Humphrey Bogart or something like that. I'm I'm wondering why they didn't go with that sort of angle. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. Um,
Because to me that would be more of a logical reason to have Humphrey, you know what I mean, Humphrey Bogart appear in it, like maybe because and it could also tie in the film noir aspect because a lot of those stories had private investigators. You know,
yeah, because Humphrey Bogart's character in that episode is not a character he would have normally played
no,
in the 40s and 50s. Like, it's a pretty odd position because he's like a businessman CEO type,
yeah.
and that's not so easy to picture.
So I'm not saying it's a bad choice. I'm just saying it's a bit of a surprise. But I guess they were going for something different,
Yeah,
something a little bit on a less predictable character, I suppose.
yeah,
But I could imagine, Bogart is maybe the soul of Lithgow's character, and that's why his mirror image bears a striking resemblance to the late actor or something like that.
yeah.
Oh, and here's another interesting thing. The episode is not narrated by Bogart himself, but by Robert Saatchi. Even though they don't credit, I don't think they credit that guy as narrating it at all in the like in the opening credits. I don't. I could be wrong, but I don't remember seeing him listed as Bogart's voice. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know, but it's an interesting fact. And you got the visual effects, the new scenes featuring the blending together the footage of Bogart, and there's a bit of a twist ending, like you said. And Isabella Rossellini is in it. We got Sherilyn Fenn and John Cassier as the voice of the Crypt Keeper. So, what do you think of his Forrest Gump style introduction?
Um, that was fascinating because it really makes the episode seem dated to me. Like, if you take that out, the episode's a little more timeless,
Yeah,
and I don't think it's a bad choice to have it in. Um,
no,
I think it's like I think it makes it kind of cool. Like, I don't think something being dated is necessarily bad.
no,
It sort of encapsulates it in the time that it's in. It
yeah.
prompts you to think of the early '90s,
Well,
early
the
to mid
Crypt
'90s.
Keeper is really just a fetid character who tells a lot of corny dad jokes.
Yeah,
Like he's old and rotten, but he's fun loving, and he is by being a cornball character, I think I think he has more leeway to tell bad jokes in some corny segments.
yeah,
So even if they were to put out an episode of Tales from the Crypt today, I think they would still do some of these old and odd references. They might reference like 1990s movies or something. I could imagine that anyway.
yeah, yeah. I could see them doing like a Harry Met Sally parody,
Yeah.
and I think it would be okay even if Met Sally became too obscure for like modern
Yeah.
audiences to know. I still think it could work, and I think
What,
they would take that kind of risk.
what would it be like? Scary Met Sally or something?
Yeah,
That's the kind of cheesy shit that the Crypt Keeper might say. Scary McSally.
yeah, yeah. I could picture that.
So this episode has a unique narrative approach. And do you have anything else that you'd like to say about it?
Uh, I think if so, I can understand if people don't like Tales from the Crypt because not every episode's a winner.
Yeah.
But this one I think is worth checking out. If you're only going to watch a few, I think this might be one worth
Oh
checking
yeah,
out.
and another episode that's like probably my favorite. is the one that has the killer Santa Claus in season one.
That's a great episode. That was the first one I saw of Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah,
And I think I was like, I think I might have been like 5 or 6 when I saw it
yeah,
at my uncle's house. He had HBO, and I was so impressed by it. So I thought someone's doing something cool with Santa. Like he's different, and I really liked it. And that was also around the time where I saw The Lost Boys. That was the first R-rated movie I saw. And I was about 5 at the time, and I remember being really impressed by that because I
yeah.
almost like they were just breaking the rules and everyone was okay with it. Like you can have blood and cursing and explosions, and it's cool. And I don't know, my 5-year-old mind enjoyed it.
You saw when you were 5 years old?
I think so. I had an older cousin that rented it.
Yeah, I know. Larry Drake does a great job as that crazed Santa in that one. I that's why I had to bring that up because it's just such a classic.
Oh, Larry Drake from Darkman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and here I go again. I have another opportunity to promote myself. I
Oh,
interviewed the production designer on Darkman. So
which is
you
another.
people out there
That's the Sam
listening,
Raimi.
what's that?
That's another Sam Raimi
Yeah,
movie,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
So you people out there, if you're wondering who I am, well, you got an idea. Um, I interview famous people sometimes. Well, I don't know how famous he really is, but he was a production designer on a big movie. So
Yeah.
I get to brag about myself once again.
Yeah. Yeah.
But definitely check that interview out as well. And do you have any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
Um. No, I don't think so. I think it's a good episode. I'm not sure if it's my favorite, but it would
Yeah,
at least be in my top 10 if I went
yeah.
through and figured out what my favorites were.
All right, so Troutface, he asked to be a part of this experience again. So I would like to thank you for reaching out to me, and you have a good day, sir.
Oh, yeah, no problemo, dude.